Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Please Get Help, the wonderful nerdy podcast where normally I would be joined by Taz and Tojik. Uh, Things have just been wonky. Uh, Taz is probably awake right now, but I don't feel like bothering him with this right now. I will be hopefully recording an episode of a new person on Sunday my time. Excuse me for any weird pauses or anything. I am fucking tired. It is past midnight. It's past the 30-second mark. We should be fine. Um, I decided just to do a little solo episode to pad out our what you call it, discography. I guess just pad out the playlist a little bit. Oh yes, number 9, wonderful episode 9. Um, What will we talk about in the first ever solo Please Get Help? And oh boy, if I am doing this Mhm. Solo, not Sobel. Sobel is the asshole captain from the first episode of Band of Brothers, not Band and Brothers. Anyway, alright. Solo episode. I am tired. Not. I am tired, sober, and solo. Anyway, what are we talking about actually after wasting 2 minutes of this? Um, I look at if you know anything about me, I am a man that relies on his interests, and the interests change with the tide, and it's always a manic hold that it has on me at any time. And let's say this week, it's the pike and shot era again. Fucking, how many times have I mentioned pike and shot on this channel? I mentioned it in episode 1 of the podcast, episode 2. I'm not quite sure. This might be the third episode of the podcast that I talk about pike and shot era again, which those of you that might not know, pike and shot refers to the period between medieval times, the oldie gallant knights and archers, and the early, and I guess the true modern period, where it's like we're starting to see more firearm use for like redcoats and such, with flintlocks and bayonets. Uh, I would strongly I myself, not an accredited historian, kind of set this between 1477 and 1700. So, in that period, we have Swiss Wars, which is when pikes really came back into European warfare after a long hiatus between the times of Philip and Alexander Macedon, and then the Scottish Shieldtron in times of William Laws and Robert the Bruce. A la 1300s, I want to say. 1300s. Maybe late 1200s, early 1300s. Uh, so, yeah, there's a big jump between use of pikes. And then Pikes are around for like several decades. We get the Italian Wars, which is a whole bunch of factions strive for control of, well, Italy. Which Italy, at this point, after the fall of the Roman Empire, fragments into smaller city-states and their colonies, like what Greece had done prior to Philip. And sorry, my punk ass little sister keeps opening her door and interrupting me, and I don't want her being recorded. Fucking what's the recording? Anyway, Pike and Shot. Swiss defeat the Charles of Burgundy. Uh, Everybody suddenly wants Swiss pike mercenaries in their armies. A pike is a very, very long spear. We're talking 14 or more feet long. The long blade at the end. Very unwieldy weapon, but it's very good in defensive formations. It's like you need to keep cavalry or other infantry away, just lower down your spikes. After that, oh wait, I was talking about the fucking Italian Wars. So in the Italian Wars, we have all the city-states like Venice, Florence, Rome, other places, and then there are foreign powers like the French, the Holy Roman Empire, and then later on the Spanish. So it's a big dog pile of factions vying for control of Italy. And then we continue on and so forth. This is where we see muskets and arquebuses start showing up. Famously with the Battle of Cerignola, 1503. Spanish force that had artillery and arquebusiers and Landsknechts, which were the German version of Swiss pikemen, like completely mollywop a French force with, the famous Swiss mercenaries and their very famous heavy knights. So that's what the Italian War. Pike and Shot has the Italian Wars, the 80 Years' War, the 80-year-long struggle for the Dutch to get their independence from the Spanish Habsburg Empire. It's not 80 years. Uh, it's not. It's not 80 years end to end. It's like some odd years, a truce, and then it picks back up after 30 years war happens again. Happened. The 30 years war only happened once. Yet, there was the expeditions into the New World, talking Columbus, fuck that guy. Cortez, fuck that guy. Pizarro, fuck him. Fuck anybody involved in the colonization of America. There were the Pilgrims, the colony of Roanoke, colony of Jamestown, so on and so forth. Uh, there's there's the rise of Protestantism. There's Henry VIII and his daughter uh, Elizabeth I, which has all the fun stuff like sinking in Mary Rose, wars with Scotland, Spanish Armada, English Armada. There's 30 Years' War, like I said, which was a religious it started out as like a religious civil war in the Holy Roman Empire, but all these different states of the Holy Roman Empire piled in, and then all these other kingdoms. Like there was Sweden, uh, Sweden, Denmark, France, Spain, the Dutch, Scotland, and England. I'm pretty sure they had there was they had their thing, which was the English Civil Wars period with the Bishops' Wars, the English Civil Wars themselves, like with Cromwell and Charlie the Charlie the First. Uh, After that, there's the entire setting of Fire and Sword, or the Deluge, which is a famous Polish book. I have the book. I haven't really read it. And even after that, there's the famous Siege of Vienna, which is like the third Siege of Vienna. The Winged Hussars arrives. Yeah, there was like the entirety of what am I thinking? The entirety of anything happening with the Ottoman Empire, like the Siege of Malta, Battle of Lepanto, the Barbary Corsairs. Like you keep going east, there's the colonization of Pacific Asian islands like the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, different European ports in China like Canton. And then there's like the entirety of the Sengoku Jidai in this period from 1477 to 1600. Which is all well and good because it's 100 years of samurai battles. Uh, Tokugawa won out in the end. Tokugawa was probably the best guy to have won out in those options of the three great unifiers. But that's probably a topic for a different episode. So yeah, there is a lot going in this period. It's kind of called the early modern period because we're starting to see a lot of, I guess, what makes it modern. There's, I don't know, greater civil rights and religious freedoms. There's another, there's a greater emphasis. I think industry is starting to really happen. Like all these, especially with all these seagoing powers, like having a navy, even in the age of sail, is a very industrious thing. You have to cast the cannons, build the ships themselves. That's like making all the ropes, cutting down the trees, and sawing the planks. There's uh, manufacturing all the gunpowder and uh, hardtack and whatnot. There's more globalization. Like I guess there's increasing trade with the Far East and the Far West. Well, we wouldn't really call it colonization trade, but there's resources coming from the Americas. Like the sugar cane that was, like sugar cane and silver that was grown and mined by uh, enslaved Native Americans and then later on Africans. Kind of a dark spot on history, but then again, history is always very dark. Uh, and then of course, there's more private adventures, and there's more private investment in things. It's in this period where the Dutch fucking invents capitalism. because we needed that apparently. Mandatory 30-second booing session for the Dutch. If you're Dutch and you're in this comments hearing this, no, I am not apologizing. You owe the rest of the world an apology. Oh, we're already at 15 minutes. I feel I could probably talk for an hour. I'm going to be very tired, but I'm always tired when I record these with Taz and Tojik. Anyway. All that was just background to what I decided to make this episode about was I have Pike and Shot on my mind, and more specifically, hear that? Surprisingly, that's a book. I have a book in my hands. This is from a series about I guess naval and maritime history, and this particular copy is on the Spanish Armada, which that's been my kind of mini obsession and the greater obsession lately. Well, not just the Spanish Armada itself, but I guess like the entire, you could say later event of leading up to, I guess the entire whatever of the latter half of Elizabeth I's career. And what I'm going to talk about is I want to, this is like a pitch for a mini series. And I guess explicitly about Drake. Or, like, I don't know if I want the events to be like Band of Brothers-esque, where it's like two common guys, or like more in the trenches on either side of this conflict. Or it's like a biopic miniseries about Sir Francis Drake. Because, like, there's a hell of a story you can tell in the life and times of Sir Francis Drake. It's like, it's literally rags to riches. He's born he's born the son of a poor English farmer, and then he, like, dies a knight and naval legend. And I think a lord, too, while he's at it. Wealthy man. There's the Hawkins expedition, where unfortunately he and his buddy Stephen Hawkins try to go to South America and sell slaves to the Spanish. Spanish wanted working off the theories of mercantilism, wanted to keep their economy fairly closed, so no English goods and no English getting the money for those goods. And so there's like a big fight that happens with that. And then he goes back to England and he gets together an expedition to go raid the Spanish and Portuguese. So at this point, with the fucking underhanded dealings of Philip II, Portugal might as well just be considered a part of Spain at this point. Which I will say, if you watch anything about the Armada, there will always either the creator themselves, like the creator will put a note or like put a pin in it. It's like, in fact, some of the better ships in the Spanish Armada were actually Portuguese, or people in the comments will say so. So, but Portugal and Spain kind of interlocked in this point of history. And then, so this big expedition where he basically, like, where Drake becomes the first man to circumnavigate the world. There's got to be the plundering of whatever they're doing on the coast of South America. Their first big score, they captured so much silver, they threw out their ballast stones out. A ballast stone is something you put in the very bottom of a wooden ship to like weigh it down and make sure it's not like too light. You have to strike a balance with this because if it's like too heavy, it'll sink, obviously. But if it's too light, it's just gonna be tossed around like a rubber ducky. And so that means they they captured so much silver from one ship that they didn't need to worry about uh they didn't need to worry about balancing the weight of the ship. It's like just they had all the silver. And it's like he's the first English speaking person to go around Cape Horn, which is the very tip of South America. It is a very murderous geological feature. It's what there's different currents, different rocky things, the weather's atrocious. There was a saying, it was like below 40 line before the 40-degree line of latitude there are no laws. Below the 50 line there are no gods. So that I think it's like still very, very, very dangerous even today. It's probably a big point of why old Theodore Roosevelt strove so hard for the Panama Canal, so shipping and naval vessels didn't have to go through Cape Horn. It's like you probably see it in Master and Commander and Mutiny on the Bounty. It's like very dangerous things to go through. So he is the first English speaking person to go through that. He maps out the Drake Passage, goes on like a several month tear through the west coast of South America. It's probably the first white man to ever see California. I mean, it's like rumored that he found that he was like in the Bay of San Francisco at some point. And then even before that, before the Cape Horn, there you could put like a courtroom drama of the Thomas Doherty incident. It's like they had an actual trial just on some beach in South America, and they hung a guy. It was because he was an insubordinate bastard, and he was probably an actual threat to the expedition. And then goes a long way around and then makes it back to uh England with a fuck ton of loot. It's like with one with like almost only 1/4 of her share. This is not the entire loot. This is not the entire haul. This is just Queen Elizabeth's cut. She managed to pay off the national debt. That is one cut out of one expedition. The man is legendary. But of course, you gotta touch on the other fucky stuff. Like, there are some less than gentle interactions with Native Americans. He was a slave trader. He abandoned a pregnant slave woman on a deserted island somewhere, so nobody in England would think lesser of him. judging for the fact he might have had a bastard with a black woman. That's pretty fucked. I mean, granted, the hostile interactions with other people might not have been with natives of South America might not have been his fault, but it's you have to touch on that, I think. Not to mention he fucking pillaged and sacked and whatnot. And then skip ahead, 1580. Well, I think it was like 1587. He leads a raid on northern Spain. I think he destroys some ships, but he also destroys like a bunch of barrel making materials. So the Spanish can't make good barrels, and that would impact them later in the long run because they didn't have good barrels for their food, fresh water, and gunpowder. And then Spanish Armada, and the famous anecdote of like, "Sir, the beacons have lit. The Armada's on his way." And then Drake was playing like a almost bowling esque game, and he looks at how the wind is faring, and he's like, "Well, we just have just enough time to finish our game." So then there's a whole thing with the Spanish Armada. It's like at several points off the coast of England, the Spanish are hammered by the British ships. This is at this point there were two different fighting philosophies between France and Spain. Not France, England and Spain when it came to fighting on the seas. Like gun putting artillery on ships was still kind of what's novel at this point. So the Spanish were very still on the get close and board kind of thing. And they would like hit a ship with like one of their volleys, and then they'd get close and then grapple, and then the I guess Spanish soldiers or Marines, if you want to call them, if we're going by the loose definition of naval infantry, would board enemy ships. That's why early galleons had these like almost like mini forts on either end of the ship. Those uh, called forecastles, and they're an anti. They're supposed to help you with boarding, but they're also supposed to help you stop people from boarding you, giving you a platform for swivel guns and muskets. And then you have the British who are starting. It's like we're like very close to the evolution of like ships of the line and what we'd see in later periods like Victory, Constitution, uh, I know there's more. Oh, it's like oh, HMS Speedy, Thomas Cochrane's first ship. I forgot about that. It's like what you see in Master and Commander. They they went without the forecastles and whatnot, and they put a bunch of guns. And so they would just stand off from the Spanish or whoever they were fighting and just pump salvos of cannonballs into the enemy ships. And then when the ships were weakened enough, they would capture them, like board and capture. So that would be. Will you knock it off, cat? I'm gonna catch fucking with a light fixture. I'm gonna get you, dude. So it's gonna be like very cinematic. It's like awesome battles, especially if they like do it the way it was, with like the slow, lumbering Spanish in their big crescent formation trying to close with the English. But the English are like always outmaneuvering them and shooting them from afar. Hey, you quit that. Yes, you. My fucking cat, I swear. Anyway, and it's like not just all the fighting on the sea. No, there's the famous fire ships. It's, and then also the fucking awful weather. Fucking cat. And what just what has survived what remains of the Armada so far getting fucking swamped in like a hurricane almost. Like you can do that right, it would just be magical on film. And then there's everything that happened on Ireland where everybody crashes, where a lot of ships wreck off the coast of Ireland. And then the English execute them. Even those that had already surrendered. It's rumored that some did get away and, in fact, kind of contribute to native Irish people that have darker hair and darker eyes than one would normally assume, aka the Black Irish. But that might not be really true. I don't know. Uh, and that that's not it either. There's still English Armada, where England gets a plan together to invade Spain, incite a insurgency among the Portuguese, and then destroy the remnants of the Armada. Will you stop turning things down, you little fuck? I'm running out of bottles of drugs, fucking kid. Anyway, there's that. So, but the English Armada is almost a bigger disaster than Spanish Armada, because they're going in. They have like a guy that has no idea what he's doing. He's made superior to Drake. There's a fucking dude that is entirely not equipped for this. Like, it's only until they get there that they realize they have no heavy siege artillery, to take any of the fortresses that are there. Like any guy. Okay, guy didn't bring any siege artillery, and he decides on the dumbest plans for attacking Lisbon. No, was it Lisbon? I think it was Lisbon. Where he wants to march instead of like going right into Lisbon and positing their troops on the high tide, getting in there fast enough before the Spanish could react. Instead of, oh, we'll land a day away and just march there, even though we have no artillery or cavalry. So that's a disaster. And then can't remember what else happens, but like once James First Stewart ascends to the throne, he like signs a peace treaty with Spain, and then there's no more of these fucking shenanigans. So like I think this would be, I don't know, something worthwhile for any any filmmaker that likes history to look into. You put some like poignant stuff in there. There's surely enough talent for people to play Drake and Philip and Elizabeth and everybody else. I don't know if you did like what HBO Rome did, and it's the story of Julius Caesar, but then you have like the two centurions that are just there, kind of showing the layman's way of life in Rome in late Republic, early Empire Rome. It's like you got your Spanish, it's like you've got your several English guys, your several Spanish guys, your Dutch guys, so on and so forth. And it's like, oh, maybe this guy and this guy die in fucking Flanders. That's what Spain and Belgium used to be called. They colloquially together, they were Spanish Flanders. And then, it's like you get a Spanish sailor and he gets shipwrecked off, Ireland, and he manages to dodge all the English soldiers, and he, like, is rescued by a fair bonny Irish lass. Kind of as a reference to the Black Irish thing. And then you got your like English and any surviving English or Portuguese or Spanish characters going through the English Armada, the English invasion of Spain, and so on and so forth. I think I am almost at 40 minutes. I think that was good enough, you know? Uh, Thank you kindly. In the comments, tell me what you think about this mini-series idea, or what you think about me doing the solo podcast. Uh, got one planned for Sunday. I might just like release that the day after Christmas. What else? What else? I'll try to do a later one with the guys. You know. Uh, I've some things I've discussed with them is to like rename the podcast instead of please get help to turn it some else like why are we here, to like kind of reflect how it's evolved more into, instead of a talk about mental health and when that's just generally nerdy shit, you know. And the famous red versus blue reference, the first words of red versus blue. Have you ever wondered why are we here? And then also debating moving this into its own channel, you know. And so, tell me what you think in the comments, or like check out the polls I have on my community tab. Uh, Thank you. Good night. I hope I didn't like bore you or confuse you too much. I know my way I put things out is a little weird. Uh, but if that's all, goodbye. I'll see you again soon.